Hi, today I would like to talk about a book called Kafka on the Shore by a certain Haruki Murakami. This book has received a World Fantasy Award and has a little over 4 stars on Goodreads, coming from 400,000 reviews. And I read it the first time when I was 16-17, which is 1 year older than the protagonist in this book, Kafka. And I liked it back then. But I had good memories of it, and I wanted to reread it now. And I shouldn't have. I'm 24 now, and so you grow between those years, and maybe I should have just kept the memories, but at the same time I recommended it to someone and now I feel bad. Just having reread it myself and seeing the fucked up shit there inside and no one mentions it. I feel like there's barely any mention of it. There's even a whole TED video about why you should read this book that was posted like 3 years ago. This book is from 2003, so almost 20 years ago. All the comments under the video were positive. But at first I thought, okay, it's a 500-page book that's maybe polluted by something that could stand on 5 pages. But I wrote the review and I realized no, it's really the backbone of the story. And this is what I want to talk about today. But first, let's read the description of the book on Goodreads. I have my screen there. Kafka on the Shore, a tour de force of metaphysical reality, is powered by 2 remarkable characters. A teenage boy, Kafka Tamura, is remarkable in the fact that he's unlovable, who runs away from home, either to escape a gruesome Oedipal prophecy or to search for his long-missing mother and sister, they don't even know, and an aging simpleton called Nakada, who never recovered from wartime affliction and now is drawn toward Kafka for a reason that, like the most basic activities of daily life, he cannot fathom. He's not drawn toward Kafka, he never meets him. He influences Kafka's story, but Kafka never meets him, never knows what he's done. So why does it say that drawn toward Kafka? He cannot draw to something he doesn't know exists. Their odyssey, as mysterious to them as it is to us, I think this... yeah, this wraps up the book. You don't know what you're reading, and at the end you're like, okay, what actually happened in that book? I couldn't tell you. I could tell you the events, but what for? This book is very vague, and it's... I guess that's what they're saying with like magical realism, but at the same time, it doesn't have any points. And the author himself, in an interview, said that it's meant to be reread like several times. Sir, there are fucking billions of books out there. You think I'm just gonna spend my time reading yours 5 times? Especially if I do not enjoy it. I don't see anything wrong with like a book being better if you read it twice. 3 times maybe, nah. 4 definitely not. Because the biggest part of whoever's gonna read that book is not gonna read it again. So it's for the 5 people who will read it 4 times. Anyway, let's continue. Cats and people carry on conversations. A ghost-like pimp employs an ejol quoting prostitute. Talk about that later. A forest harbors soldiers apparently unaged since World War II, and rainstorms of fish and worse fall from the sky. It happens twice, once it's fish, once it's leeches, and only the leeches have a point. And then it's like the guy forgot he can do it, and it never happens again. So, okay. There is a brutal murder, with the identity of both victim and perpetrator a riddle. Yet this, along with everything else, is eventually answered. It's not? Even in the interview, the man himself says, Kafka on the Shore contains several riddles, but there aren't any solutions provided. No one can agree on what this book is about. This, along with everything else, is eventually answered, just as the entwined destinies of Kafka and Nakada are gradually revealed. with one escaping his fate entirely and the other given a fresh start on his own. If by escaping his fate, he dies, Nakata, but isn't death his fate then? Whatever. Let's read the Wikipedia one. Comprising two distinct but interrelated plots, indeed, the odd-numbered chapters tells the story of 15-year-old Kafka as he runs away from his father's house to escape an Oedipal curse and to embark upon a quest to find his mother and sister. So here's Anne, like I said. After a series of adventures, he finds shelter in a quiet private library in Takamatsu, run by the distant and aloof Miss Seiki. Sorry if I butcher any names, by the way. It's all Japanese. And the intelligent and more welcoming Oshima. There he spends his days reading the unabridged Richard Francis Burton translation of 1001 Nights. What does that have to do with anything? He's barely mentioned in the book. And the collected works of Natsume Soseki, until the police begin inquiring after him in connection with the murder of his father that he does not know he has committed. Oshima brings him to the forest of Kochi Prefecture, where Kafka is ultimately healed. What did I read? This does not paint a picture of what's inside the book. What the fuck? Sure, someone should revise this page. This description of the book is kind. This does not prepare you for what's inside. Well, like I said, the actual fucked up things could stand on 5 pages if in terms of written events. But what is actually in that book, you may ask me, because I still haven't said it. So the story as I read it. Kafka leaves his house because his father tells him a prophecy. The prophecy being that he will kill his father, fuck his mom, and fuck his sister. Of all the things. But let's read a little excerpt from the interview. So the interviewer asked, "What made you want to retell the Oedipus myth? Did you have a plan to do this when you started Kafka on the Shore? Or did it come about during the writing?" And he answers, "The Oedipus myth is just one of several motifs and isn't necessarily the central element in the novel." Kind of is though. That's the whole reason why he's run away in the first place. From the start I had planned to write about a 15-year-old boy who runs away from his sinister father and sets off on a journey in search of his mother. This naturally linked up with the Oedipus myth. No, it does not naturally link up. What? So you imagine a character looking after their mother and all you can think about is, that reminds me of Oedipus. No! What? Naturally linked. You know, some people, you tell them mother, they think, childhood, warmth, security, or maybe the opposite if you have shitty parents. But not sex. Oh my god, and I looked at a summary of the Oedipus myth because I've never read it whole. And he does not look for his mother. He's trying to avoid her actually because he got this prophecy from the oracle. No, he's looking for her. Actually, okay, no, let's continue the description of the story because I'm getting too far ahead. He leaves his house, he takes the train, the bus, whatever, is just going away, and he meets a girl named Sakura on the bus. And they meet at a gas station when the bus stops. They talk a little bit, they go back to the bus, and she falls asleep, and he looks at her tits. Yes, it's a scene. Let me read an excerpt. "I stare at her chest. As she breathes, the rounded peaks move up and down like the swell of waves, somehow reminding me of rain falling softly on a broad stretch of sea." What? You're just staring at her tits, dude. It's not by making it poetic that it's not gonna be creepy, okay? There's nothing poetic about looking at someone's chest when they're asleep. That's just being a creep. Anyway, they part when the bus arrives and he goes to a hotel. So Kafka is at the hotel, and what he does mostly is go to the library and to the gym. And the library he goes to is like rich people turn their house into a library. And there he meets Oshima, the librarian, and a chick called Miss Seiki, who is like this 40... No, she's more than that. I think she's like 50 something. I don't think she's younger than 40. And she's this mysterious woman that's just like in her office all day writing with her fountain pen, and it's a Mont Blanc. Why do I know it's a Mont Blanc? Because he mentions it several times. So Kafka cannot stay eternally at the hotel because he knows that people are gonna start asking questions. But you know, he's 15 and looks much older because he's ripped and he talks well, he's intelligent, he reads, and like his classmates, he's not like other girls, you know. He's like the poster child of this. Literally child. Why not make him 17? He would still be an underage runaway, but it would make more sense if he was older. Anyway, at some point, he wakes up at night on the street and he's covered in blood. And he's like, I don't know what happened. He calls Sakura and she invites him over because she doesn't live far. And that's when stuff starts to go downhill. So he tells her his story. And then she's like, okay, you can sleep in my bedroom. He has a sleeping bag and all. But neither of them can fall asleep. And she... I don't know what sort of weird fantasy that is, but she invites him into her bed. But she says, I have a long-term boyfriend. Okay, you don't do anything to me. But she gives him a hand job. So he can fall asleep. This would never happen. Whoever has read this and think, that's interesting, this would never happen, okay? Never on earth a girl is gonna invite a stranger home and giving a hand job because he cannot sleep, okay? Anyway, he leaves our house afterwards and he goes to the library and he tells Oshima that he doesn't really have anywhere to go now. And Oshima's like, oh, okay, I'm gonna take you to my brother's cabin in the woods and I'll figure something out. So he takes Kafka to the cabin in the woods and he just stays there, reads, exercises, wanks. And when Oshima comes back, he's naked on the porch and Oshima's like, you got a nice dick. But Kafka can stay at the library. He just has to work there, you know, do the basic stuff, and then he can just read and sleep there. While this is happening, Nakata, the old man, who lives where Kafka used to live, is like talking to cats because he has this power of talking to cats since the incident. This incident being that when he was a child, there was the war and he got sent off to a rural part of the country and they were just going to go pick mushrooms. They go on this hill with the teacher and then at some point the kids just faint for no reason, all of them, apart from the teacher. And she runs out to get help. She doesn't know what happened. They don't know if it's like poison gas or anything, and it's never explained. But Nakara was one of those children. And we learned in a later chapter her point of view from the teacher, and something that she did not mention to the army when they were investigating. And it has no point. She sends a letter to the doctor who took care of Nakara because Nakara is the only child that did not wake up right after the incident. And he had to go to a hospital and be looked at for a few weeks, and then he just woke up and he could not read, he could not remember his name and stuff. So that's his story. But so before that happens, as she says in her letter, She tells the doctor that the night before she had a sexual dream with her husband, and we get like the details of the sexual dream with her husband. The whole point of her telling this is that when they were climbing the hill, she suddenly got her period and she was ashamed. She uses towels to wipe the blood off, and then she buries them, and Nakata finds them. It just doesn't make sense. First, you don't just towel period blood off, it keeps coming, okay? And how did he find, like, why did he go and get towels off the dirt? He was like supposed to be a great student and stuff. Why would he do this in the first place? Anyway, he digs them up, he takes them to her, and she's very ashamed and embarrassed, and she slaps Nakata. So that is the point of her. Well, that is what she wants to tell the professor. She says that they were on a flat rock having sex. It was a light grey rock near the top of a mountain. The whole thing was about the size of 2 tatami mats. Why does that matter? It's like, what do you want to get your word count on an essay? Come on. There wasn't any wind. Birds were hurrying off their nest. Just... why? Why? That's my question for this whole scene. Just say, oh, I climbed the hill and I suddenly got my period. And I was embarrassed. That's it. You could have skipped the whole sexual dream. The professor does not need to know. We tried all sorts of positions and did it over and over, climaxing again and again. For the first time in our lives, we'd thrown away all restraints and were going at it like animals. Then she wakes up. My body felt heavy, and I could still feel my husband deep inside me. My heart was pounding, and I found it hard to breathe. My vagina was wet, just like after intercourse. I'm embarrassed to say it, and not! But I masturbated at this point. I was burning with lust. And then she says she went to the school and started the field trip. As we walked up the mountain path, I could still feel the lingering effects of sex. All I had to do was close my eyes and I could feel my husband coming inside me. His semen shooting against the wall of my womb. Yeah, and all that was just to say that it wasn't time for my period, so that's why I didn't prepare. I feel like this is just a cheap excuse to write a sex scene. No one would fucking write that. She was embarrassed to say it during the investigation, and now she's writing this very graphic letter to the professor. Once again, that would never happen. Anyway, we know Nakata's backstory, so now he's a simpleton, like the same description. But he's good at finding lost cats because he can actually talk to them. That's his like superpower. We don't know why he has that. It's never explained. And he's on a job to find a cat. It starts going like way out of his usual boundaries. Because basically he's talking to a house cat and she tells him that there's this man called Johnny Walker with a top hat who's been capturing cats in a certain field. And she says that she thinks that the cat she is looking for has been caught by this man. So Nakata goes to the field and just waits there for several days until the man shows up. Well, no, it's not the man who shows up, it's a big dog. And the dog basically like says in his dog language like, follow me, which Nakata does. And he's being led to Johnny Walker's house. And there Johnny Walker is just torturing the cats. He's paralyzing them, and then it opens them up, eats their hearts, cut their heads off, and put them in his fridge. He asked Nakata to kill him. He's doing all that because he is collecting cat souls to make a flute. I don't remember what the flute does because it's just mentioned once at the end of the book, and it's not even used. So I don't know what was the point of that either. Yeah. We get a nicely graphic scene of the man just opening up a cat and eating its heart, and it wasn't necessary as well to like go into so much details, especially if you like cats or just animals in general. That's not the best thing to read. And the point is that it makes Nakata very angry. He picks up a knife and stabs Johnny Walker because the next cat in his bag is the one he's supposed to give back to the family, which he does. Afterwards, he goes to the police to turn himself in. He says, I just murdered the man. But he starts telling about all the Johnny Walker stuff to the policeman, and he's like, okay, it's crazy. He tells him his name, but the policeman asks, okay, what characters? Nakata says, I don't know, I can't read. And the policeman's like, okay, then I cannot write your name, sorry. Nakata says, oh, be careful because tomorrow it will be raining fish. And it does rain fish the next day. But why? Like I said at the beginning, like fish rain, but in this instance, why? It doesn't add anything. We just get a newspaper article about like it rained fish. What for? Because that was sufficient that they found the body of a man that had been stabbed where Nakata said that it happened. So the policeman's like, oh shit, I didn't take this guy's name. And turns out that the man that was murdered was Kafka's father. But it's never clear, like, did Nakata kill him? Was it actually him that Nakata killed? Or was it someone else? Or did Kafka do it because he woke up with blood on him? It's never explained. You never know in the end what happened. And that's a lot with a lot of things in this book. Everything's so vague. Things happen but they don't connect, and things happen for nothing. I'm not saying that everything has to have a purpose, but there are too many things that don't have a purpose in this book. So yeah. And then Nakata leaves. He also takes the bus, the train, and he goes wherever. He's got like this weird internal mission. He just knows when he'll get to the next point when he sees it. That's the whole thing with him. He doesn't know. He just knows. I don't know how to explain. Like, he knows when he sees it, but he doesn't know exactly what he's looking for. So he's like hitchhiking, taking the bus, train, and at some point he finds a truck driver called Oshino, who's just gonna help him for the rest of his quest. Let's go back to Kafka. So after his little escapade in the cabin in the woods, now he's living in the library, and he starts getting an interest in Miss Seiki because she's all mysterious and oh, this woman, you know, like she's a person, okay? They make her sound like this weird magical creature, mythical creature. She's just a woman, okay? Also, I don't remember exactly what part of the story was, but we get a whole chapter almost about these two crazy feminists going into the library and starting to say like, why aren't the female authors like organized like the male authors and stuff like that? And why is there just one gender neutral toilet? And the whole chapter just felt like, oh, owning feminists. Like Murakami was like, ha, I have all these arguments against feminists, I'm gonna make a chapter just making ridicule out of them. And in this chapter you also learn that Oshima was born a woman. And at first I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, like to have a gender non-conforming character, especially in 2003. But I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, because when I was writing my review, I started thinking, the women in this, I don't think it's just in this book, because I also read Men Without Women and I didn't like it. I thought it was like sexist, and women were just there to be sexual, and it's the same in this one. For example, Sakura, She gives him a hand job. When he's at the hotel, there's this receptionist. And he's in his bed wanking, thinking about her, and trying to not think that she may be his sister. Okay? In the description, there's a age-aspiring prostitute that's mentioned. I will talk about that later when it comes into the story. But basically, she's she's a philosophy student, and she's working as a prostitute to pay for her studies. So again, sexual. Miss Seiki also at some point is sexual. It's like all the women are just there for that, for sex. I had the same impression in Men Without Women, and I have the same thing there. Women are just there for sex. And I really do not enjoy that. They're like these mysterious characters that are absolutely no development. Also the teacher from the beginning, when she sends a letter to the professor, she was also sexual. And what I want to say with that is that Oshima was born a woman, but is actually a man. And at first I thought, okay, it's cool to have like a transgender character. I don't know if you actually meant to make him transgender or just something else, I don't know. But then I realized Oshima is smart and there's no sex scenes with him. So, you know, he talks about culture, music and stuff, and I'm thinking like, what if the author wanted to have a female main character, and then that's just wild speculation, but he started writing her, and I thought, but a woman could not say all this and just, okay, he's transgender, and then so different from all the female characters that, yeah, he's a man, because that's how you write men. You know, cultured and intelligent, and, well, you know, there's the prostitute who talks about philosophy, but it's just cheap. Anyway, let's continue. So Kafka is intrigued about Miss Seiki, and one day he goes into her office and basically like implies that he thinks she's his mother. She does not deny it, just being all mysterious. And one day, when he's sleeping, he wakes up in the middle of the night, and then this like ghost inside his room, sitting at the desk and just looking at a painting of a boy on a beach. And he falls in love with the ghost. How desperate are you on a scale from 1 to 10? And he thinks this is the ghost of Miss Seiki. And he asks Oshima, do you think like people who are still alive can have ghosts? And there's like this whole discussion and whatever. But yeah, he's persuaded that it is the ghost of Miss Seiki when she was 15. Because when she was young, she had a boyfriend that she loved very much, and he had to go to war, and he got killed there because he was mistaken for someone else, and it really broke her. And before that, she had written a song called KAFKA on the Shore. And the song makes no sense. And let's read a little bit more from the interview. Kafka discovers a song, Kafka on the Shore, and wonders if the woman who wrote it knew what the lyrics meant. Another character says, not necessarily. Symbolism and meaning are two separate things. Since your novel and the song share a title, how much does this statement say about the novel itself? Does its symbols point to a larger meaning? And first, it starts by answering, I don't know a whole lot about symbolism. This whole book is just symbols. You read stuff and you know it's not what it actually means, and you have to dig deeper. This whole book is symbols, right? And then he says, I don't really know what the lyrics of the song mean. Or whether they have any meaning in the first place. He just wrote like bullshit and called it a day. Anyway, she sang this one song and then never did again because her boyfriend was dead. And she did not feel anything anymore. She was just like dead inside. That's why she had a ghost of herself, I guess. And Kafka starts falling in love with the real one as well. Remember that he's 15 and she's over 40. And he just theorized that she may be his mother. And one day, He's again in his bed and he's waiting for the ghost. But instead, the real Miss Seiki comes. And she's like sleepwalking. She sleepwalks to his bed, undresses, and sits on his little rococo. 911, I'd like to report 3 crimes in 1. Why? 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 Why does this have to happen? This is the problem with this book, if you couldn't tell. Oh my god. And he loves it, by the way. So he enjoys it. Now he's even more into her because, wow. So she leaves and she doesn't know what happened. However, one day he goes into her office and he basically like implies, you know, I kind of want you. They go on the beach together. She shows him like where the painting was made. And then they go back and they do it again, but this time she's awake and she knows damn well what she's doing, and she knows that she's his mother. She never outright says it, but she's not denying it. You know, you can write incest, rape, murder, whatever in your book. However, you need to like have a clear meaning that it is wrong, right? For example, in Game of Thrones, Cersei and Jaime are twins and they fuck. But there are clear repercussions for them. You know, they're shamed, it's disgusting, something happens to them. It's not considered normal or romantic or stuff. No, these scenes are written like sex scenes between consenting, non-related adults. And I just hated it. I hated it. I did not need to know the details. Because there are details. I also do not need to know that his dick stings afterwards. Okay, that's shit chlamydia. That's not normal. And I want to say that, yeah, these scenes could fit on like 5 pages. But it's the whole meaning of the book, in a way. This prophecy is the reason he ran away. And the reason he's doing all these things he's doing. And then it climaxes, no pun intended, when he actually fulfills it. He did fuck his mother in the end. And he knew. He had the feeling inside of him that it was his mother, and he did it. You know, the first time, okay, he didn't move, he was probably in shock, whatever. But afterwards he asked for it, so come on. Let's go back to Nakata for a minute. He meets this guy called Oshino. A lot of his parts felt a bit like filler because it's supposed to be like parallel to that of Kafka. Nakata is doing things that are influencing Kafka's life in a way, but it only becomes clear at the end. He's on this quest to find an entrance stone. I won't explain too much now, but Oshino takes him places and thinks that it reminds him of his own grandpa, and so he's, you know, kind of attached to him in a way, so he just follows his shenanigans and tells his boss like, oh, I'm taking some days off. And the whole thing is just like, I'll know it when I see it. He tells that Oshino 1 billion times. The only thing he says more than that is, I cannot read. It gets a little old at some point. So Oshino is helping him, you know, just going around. But I say it's kind of filler because most of the time they're just like eating or sleeping or stuff. So yeah, I feel like it's just to fill the chapter without it being like 3 pages. There are 2 instances when Nakata sleeps for a very long time. Like for 36 hours, let's say. And it just feels like a cheap way to fast travel in time, Like, oh, he could not figure out what Nakata could be doing these days while Kafka is advancing in his own way. So it's like, okay, let's just make him sleep for 3 days straight. And during this time, there's just Oshino going around to the cinema, eating and going to coffee shops, and buying new underwear because he does not want to wash it. It felt a bit pointless, but when we finally get to interesting stuff, it's basically when Oshino is during, the long sleep of Nakata, is just going around in the street and he meets this ghost-like pimp that was mentioned, who's called Colonel Sanders. Yes. And this man says, I need you for something, and in exchange he's giving him a girl. But thinking bad about it, basically the Colonel Sanders wants Oshino to pick up the entrance stone that he's looking for and has no idea where it is, and to bring it to Nakata or something. So they both have the same goal. He could just tell him, I know where your stone is. Just go pick it up. He doesn't say like, I need a favor. No, they both want the same thing, like just take the stone and leave. But I feel like it was just another excuse for a sex scene, because it's like getting this sex machine who's doing prostitution to pay for her studies. So he fucks with her. He comes 3 times. It's mentioned like twice. I don't care! I don't care! That does not add anything to the story! It's just cheap sex. I hate it. I hate it. This book is indeed magical realism. It has some nice parts. It's well written. It's magical, yes. And when it's not like talking about crude details like the foreskin of Kafka or the sex scenes, it would have been a really nice book. But he had to add those like crude sex scenes, and I don't care. It ruins the whole thing. It ruins it for me. Anyway, Oshino goes to get the entrance stone. He's like a bit scared of being cursed because he's taking something from like an altar. He brings it back to Nakata, puts him next to him while he's sleeping, and then when he gets up,
finally awake,
they just like stare at it during a storm. And at some point, well, the stone is getting bigger and heavier, and they're just staring at it, and at some point Nakata's like, you have to flip it. Oshino flips it, and now it's open. So what is the point of opening that stone? What I figured out myself, well, first, let's talk about what happens to Kafka. So the police comes to the library asking for him, and Oshima is like, okay, we need for you to lay low for a bit. So he takes Kafka back to the cabin, and he tells him that, a little history of the place, that soldier used to go there for exercises during the war, and that 2 soldiers were never found again. Oshima tells Kafka, if you go into the woods and you don't know what you're doing, you're gonna get lost and die, basically. And Kafka's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go in the woods. And he just goes, and he takes his, he has an axe, he has like paint, I think, to mark the trees where he's going. But at some point he just decides to drop everything, because I think a night during like that second cabin trip, he dreamt about Sakura, and he dreams that he's putting his little rococo into her while she's sleeping. This fulfills the prophecy because they consider themselves as siblings. Anyway, so he rapes her in his dream, not in reality, but still. It's still a way too long scene of him doing it with her, and it's implied that she enjoys it, by the way. And just, I have to read it. So he dreams that he's back at her place. He gets up in the middle of the night to drink, and then he goes to her bed and just lays down with her. And I want to read you my favorite line in this whole entire book. I'm glad that I read it when I was in my bed and not like on a train or something, because I'm just gonna read it, okay? So laying down in her bed. I pull up Sakura's t-shirt and fondle her soft breasts. I tweak her nipples as if I'm adjusting a radio dial. What? What? Just how do you do that? Radio dials, no. You just So it's like going on saying that he takes her panties off, and I make up my mind. No, actually, I haven't made up my mind about anything. Making up your mind means you have a choice, and I don't. Because you're dreaming? I strip off my boxers, releasing my cock. Why did I use cock? In this, like, it just doesn't fit the rest of the writing. If he had used penis, it would have sounded less weird, but they use cock. It sounds so out of place, like you're reading and you're getting punched in the face. My cock no longer hurts. In the past few days, the tips become even harder. Why do I care? Then she wakes up. Kafka, what are you doing? It would seem that I am inside you, I reply. But why? Didn't I tell you that's off limits? I can't help it. Stop this now, get it out of me. I can't. Listen to me. First of all, I've got a steady boyfriend, okay? And second, you've come into my dream without permission. That's not right. I don't think that's the problem right now. I know. It's still not too late. You're inside me, but you haven't started moving. You haven't come yet. It's just unmoving inside me, as if it's thinking about something. Take it out, and let's pretend this never happened. I can't forget it, and so should you. I'm your sister, and you're my brother. Even if we're not blood related, we're most definitely brother and sister. We're part of a family, we shouldn't be doing this. No shit. It's too late, I tell her. Why? Because I decided it is. And his excuse for this is the following paragraph. You don't want to be at the mercy of things outside you and more, or thrown into confusion by things you can't control. You've already murdered your father and violated your mother, and now here you are inside your sister. If there's a curse to all this, you mean to grab it by the horns and fulfill the program that's been laid out for you. Lift the burden from your shoulders and live. Not caught up into someone else's schemes, but as you. Wow. Amazing. I just don't understand the point of this book. What's the point of this book? What am I supposed to take from this? That if some bad things are supposed to happen to me, I should just grab them by the horns and do it, even though it's gonna affect other people? She covers her face with her hands and cried a little. You feel sorry for her, but there's no way you're going to leave her body. Your cock swells up inside her, gets even harder, as though it's set on runes. And she says it like, I understand. No. I won't say anymore. But I want you to remember something. You're raping me. Yeah, no shit! And then afterwards, Sakura closes her eyes and gives herself up to the emotion. She doesn't say a word or resist. Her face is expressionless, turned away from you. But you feel the pleasure rising up in her like an extension of yourself. Oh, why was this written? This man sat at his desk, wrote the first draft, the second draft, maybe a third, I don't know. He says he read it again like a few times. He thought, that's a good scene to put in a book, sent to a publisher. And the publisher was like, that sounds like a good scene to publish. That's the thing, when there are fucked up things in books, they don't just happen, you know? There's someone behind that book. I'm trying to write stuff myself, and it takes a lot of effort and thinking. So this scene was well thought out. It was rewritten a few times, probably. It was sent to an editor who read it, and then to a publisher who published it. Why? How can you write stuff? The whole book is based on a prophecy that's so fucked up that just came out of your mind and comes naturally. Bitch. So, after this scene, he goes into the woods, and at some point he just drops all his equipment and is like, fuck it, I wanna die. And he walks, and he meets the 2 soldiers that were lost since the war. And from what I understand, if he goes further, now that the entrance stone is open by Nakata, he can now cross to this, I don't know, just what I imagine is like a realm of the dead. It's like a small village, and he goes there. There's a chick that comes to make him food, and the chick is 15-year-old Miss Seiki, and when he sees her, he obviously describes her breasts. I feel like almost every female character, when they're described in his book, it's just their tits or something other. Anyway, at some point, we have to go back to Nakata first. Because, okay, this entrance stone is open, and now they have to find something else, and he doesn't know yet what it is. So he asks Oshino to just go around the city until he sees it. They go around, they cannot find anything, but one day Oshino takes a wrong turn and they find themselves in front of the Takamatsu library that Kafka was in. And in there is Miss Seiki. She does the tour of the library with Nakata and Oshino. And then Nakata is like, I need to get into her office. And he just comes up to talk to her, even though the others are like, that's off limits, dude. And he sits down in front of her and she's like, is that who I've been waiting for? And they were meant to meet. She gives him her papers, which is her life story, and she asks him to burn it, which he does. Then they go back to the apartment they are at. Nakata starts to sleep again, and Oshino's like, okay, he's gonna sleep like the dead again. But he does indeed sleep like the dead because he doesn't wake up. So he's dead. He's dead. And Oshino's like, oh shit, what do I do? The entrance stone is still open. And colonist Sanders gives him a call and says, okay, there will be a time when you will know that you're supposed to flip it closed. And there will be this entity that will try to pass through, and you have to stop it. But it doesn't want to describe any part of that entity. And Oshino's like freaking out. He's just preparing, stays in the apartment with the stone next to him. Yeah, at some point there's this like white worm that comes out of Nakata's mouth, and Oshino just like stabs it and stuff until it's dead, and then flips the stone. Well, no, he flips the stone, then the creature is like, oh shit, where do I go? And he just like stabs it to death. And that's it for the Oshino Nakata part of the story. It's not even a real ending for him. Nakata's dead, and Oshino like is thinking, oh, what do I do with my life now? And now he can talk to cats himself. We don't know why, we don't know what for, and then it just stops with his story, and we go back to Kafka. So now Kafka is in this realm before Oshino closes the entrance stone, and the real Miss Seiki comes, because when Nakata left with her papers, she died of a heart attack on her desk like 5 minutes later. So now she's there, and she tells Kafka, you can't stay here, you have to go back to the world. And so she talks to him, and then she cuts herself on the arm and then makes him drink her blood. And it's not explained why. I don't understand why. Maybe I'm missing something, but is that another sort of weird fetish thing? I don't know. I think that's the whole book. Like, it could be resumed that is it sort of a weird fetish thing. He comes back to the soldier. He comes back to the cabin, and then Oshima picks him up, and Kafka's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to my old life and finish school, and that's the end of the story. But right before that, I talked that the flute with the cat souls was mentioned once again at the end, and we just see like Johnny Walker trying to play the flute, but he gets attacked and nothing happens. There's no point. There is no point, or maybe I missed it, I don't know. But I am definitely not reading the book a third time to find out, okay? So that was the story of this book, and I gave it a 1 star, obviously, because, okay, there are all those, like, all that magic inside, it's well written, and there are some stuff that make you think. It's just so tainted with, like, that incestuous pedophile rape stuff that I don't understand how people like can go past it. I could the first time because I was 16 and I didn't realize how fucked up it is, I guess. I knew it was fucked up, but I didn't like read more into it and realize that it was the whole book is about that at the end, because that's the prophecy and he ran away because of that prophecy. I don't understand why we don't talk more about this. It's like people just... Well, when you finish this book, you're kind of a sort of brain fog because you're like, what did I just read? And you're trying to think about stuff, and I think this like pulls you away from that problematic part of the book. Like, oh, magical, and you think about stuff. And it did make me think sometimes, but I get this terrible aftertaste of reading those disgusting sex scenes of a mom with her son, and I just cannot go past it. Whenever I think of this book, I think of incest and not whatever the author tried to make you think about. Because what should I take from this book? What should I learn from this book? I don't know. Everything is so vague, and then there's fucked up shit in there. What am I supposed to take out of it? I'm not saying every book needs to have a moral, but this is written like sometimes like a philosophy lecture, so I think I'm supposed to take something from it. Instead, I get paragraphs like, sitting on the sofa in the cabin, the odor of the faded fabric all around me. Memories of our lovemaking rise in my head. Miss Seiki is slowly removing her clothes, getting into bed. My cock, not surprisingly, is rock hard as these thoughts filter through my mind. But the tip's not red or sore anymore and doesn't sting. Hi, I'd like to be admitted into a mental facility. Thank you for watching. I never want to see this book again. And you should not read it. Or if you read it, you should know what happens in there actually. Not the whimsical stuff that Dead talks about.